Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jeremy Martin, Vice President, Energy and Sustainability at the Institute of the Americas. Thank you for joining us for another installment of our energy webinar series. We're very pleased to have Walter Pesenti as our featured presenter today. I'll introduce Walter in a minute. He will be speaking about a very interesting topic and something that he has spent pretty much his whole career working on. And we look forward to hearing from Walter about digital technology and how digitalization and use of data can help oil and gas companies accelerate their success. But first, I wanted to review the agenda for those of you who may not have joined us before. We run the webinars with a featured presentation of about 20-30 minutes. And then after the conclusion of the formal presentation by our speaker, we will move to a short Q&A session to wrap up the webinar. So in 1 hour, we'll have a formal presentation and a question and answer session. And just again, for those who may not have participated before, we use the chat function on the webinar platform to manage the questions and answers. It's all done by the chat function. And so if you see where I type the word question, anytime during the course of the presentation or the program, you can feel free to type a question or make a comment or anything you so choose there. Some of you have already found the chat function. Alejandro, Cesar, thank you. Good morning to you as well. Appreciate you chiming in. So that's how we'll run the formal part of the webinar. And let me quickly just mention a couple of things here at the Institute of the Americas before I turn it over to Walter. We're very pleased to be able to organize a session together with several partners in Mexico City next week on a critical issue of what is probably best summarized as facility license to operate. That is how energy companies and communities and government work together on sustainable project development and social development regarding energy projects. Critical theme, increasingly critical theme ever since the energy reform unleashed a wave of investment in private participation in the market. And toward the end of the month, we are doing 2 programs in Colombia. October 23rd and 24th, we will be hosting 2 different roundtables. One very dedicated to the oil and gas developments under the new Duque administration on October 23rd. And the second on October 24th, more related to the power sector, but particularly the advance and incorporation of renewable energy in Colombia and sort of what we are calling energy transition. And that second program is part of our newly launched energy transition initiative. So we hope you can join us in person for those events. But meanwhile, today for our webinar, we will turn it over to Walter Pesenti. And let me just tell you about Walter before I ask him to start his remarks. I've known Walter for several years now, and it's always a pleasure to have him join us. He's a true expert in the field. He's not just somebody who works at a consulting company, but he comes from industry. He has a long history of working in the industry, the oil and gas industry to be specific. And he's focused most of his career on operational excellence, operations, and how companies can succeed. And so today what he's going to share is his latest work and analysis on more the digital and analytics of how global energy companies, but particularly the oil and gas sector, can use those tools to really drive performance and succeed in an ever more competitive marketplace. And so, like I said, Walter's not somebody just who's worked his whole career at a consultancy. He actually is a long-term practitioner from the oil and gas company side, and I'm sure he'll be able to share both sides of that coin with us this morning. And so, I want to thank him, and especially I want to thank Nathan Associates, where Walter is a senior vice president these days, senior vice president of their energy practice. And so, without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Walter for his formal presentation, and then we'll come back and have some questions and discussion when he's finished with his formal remarks. So Walter, thanks again for joining us. Thanks to Nathan Associates for your participation today.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good morning, everyone. I know that you guys can speak yet. We'll have an opportunity at the end, like Jeremy mentioned, to have questions. So please ask a lot of questions and use the chat function. Jeremy will ask at the end. So the topic, like Jeremy mentioned, is going to be, can digital technology help oil and gas organizations accelerate their success? In reality, it's not only oil and gas. This is target oil and gas. It's all asset-intensive industry. That's energy. I want to say power is power generation, transmission, distribution, mining, paper mill, all the asset-intensive industry. It is applicable. However, the learning I'm going to speak about today is around oil and gas. So Jeremy did a great intro myself. Yes, I came from the industry, so I spent about 30 years in the industry. So 17 years at ExxonMobil, Chevron 1 year, Shell 6 years, BP 2 years, and then for the last 5-6 years I've been consulting. And I was in different roles. I wasn't just in technology. I was in operation, asset management, reliability, finance. So I rotated for different functions. You know, the main thing, actually, Jeremy mentioned, is I help many businesses reduce risk exposure, which is licensed to operate, and also on top of that, produce savings anywhere from $50 to $1.4 billion in savings. And education, BS in industrial engineering, BS in business, and MBA. So that's a little bit about myself. I got to give you a little bit about Nathan. Nathan has been associates, has been in business for 70 years. Is in about 150 countries. Is headquartered in Arlington, Washington. It's about 250 employees and hundreds of consultants. And we have experience at high-level house experts. So, you know, there is high-level expertise, people like myself and Nathan. So our value is the trusted partner, counterpart worldwide. We have a quick reaction time, customized support for the client, so no off-the-shelf product, and high-quality analysis and customized support. So that's it for Nathan, and I'm gonna dive into the presentation. So before I start the presentation, you know, we all talk about digital, and just give a little bit of background. Most of you guys know it's the fourth industrial revolution, and the four major industrial eras since the industrial revolution of the 18th century. So the underlying basic for the fourth industrial revolution lies in advancing communication and connectivity rather than just technology. So the communication and the connectivity is key for this revolution, the fourth revolution. It has a great potential to connect billions of people through the web, drastically improve efficiency of the business organization, and help generate environment for better asset management. Pretty much take advantage of this revolution, the connectivity, the web. Looking at the industry, oil and gas industry, so the data they have tons of data, and they use data to make many decisions. However, there is the term big data. So there is a lot more that can be done with the data and what they have to do with that data. All segments of the industry, industry supply chain, collect data and important historic information. So, and today topics are going to be, I'm going to use 3 examples to visualize factors, challenges, route to optimize, and incorporate digital technology. But also I'm going to emphasize the behavioral change to make that technology work. At the end, I'm going to allow time. And so most important, you got to wait to the end to ask for questions. So that is important to stay. And the digital is key for the oil and gas. To use digital technology to stay competitive, to stay in business. So the three examples, 3 cases I'm going to talk about today. One is going to have to do with the manufacturing transformation, refining and chemical. Another one is going to be an end-to-end transformation, downstream and upstream. One about value chain transformation, oil and gas. And then I'm going to use an example to show the typical value realization timing for a digital transformation. In this case, as a manufacturing transformation for refining chemical, this is a global refining and petrochemical of an IOC, integrated oil company. The opportunity was their projects, operation, manufacturing needed to be more efficient. They were already effective, but the cycle was too long. So it included SAP, Integras, and Aviva technology. But it also, as part of the technology, had big data analytics, the blockchain, the software, the mobile technology, cloud, cybersecurity, augmented and virtual reality. So it touches a lot of technology. The setting for this implementation was one consistent system across all sites. So we're trying to standardize one way across all sites. And it was, they were looking for the entire life cycle of the equipment. If you look in the drawing, it's hard to see, but the drawing, the top part, I had a lot of churn when we got to the site, is how to streamline that churn so there is a straight line to where the information is needed and throughout the whole life cycle of the equipment. It was developed for all areas of the business. However, the client, for the right reason, immediate manufacturing implementation was put on hold on the supply chain, product lifecycle management, and engineering data management were fully implemented. And the main reason for holding maintenance manufacturing implementation, we did the development, was that we assessed the organization and they had a bit of an overlap because the same people implementing the supply chain had to implement manufacturing. So we decided to slow down a bit the implementation. And I'm going to talk about a bit about that. In some cases, you have to slow down the implementation. The approach, it was business-led, so the business was driving the implementation, and it had IT support. The technology was implemented 8 months into the project, so the first phase or the first 8 months of the project, we did a lot of people transformation, process transformation, and then the technology was actually launched 8 months after. In this case, we agree with the client that we're going to pilot it on one side. So it was piloted in the Asia Pacific region. They had a plan to build a $7 billion expansion. So with that, we learned some challenges and resolved some issues with cybersecurity, process misalignment, communication with other tools. So we learned a lot from that pilot and went back and make fine tunes. And then we roll it out throughout the world. The benefits, and I'm going to talk about throughout the whole thing about benefits and business case. Let me mention that business case is very important for the digital implementation. You have to have a business case. You have to track the business case. And in some cases, you have to make adjustment, either do the full implementation, do more, do less, or in some cases, you have to abandon implementation and reassess what you have to do. In this case, we identified $650 to $700 million in saving. They were hard dollar. They were real dollar in saving versus soft dollar, what we call a lost profit opportunity. So if we account for the lost profit opportunity or the soft dollar, it would have been nearly a $2 billion business case. So the takeaway from this implementation, so business has to be part of the entire digital journey. So the business has to be involved. It's not an IT function, since the business is going to gain the value from the digital implementation. The next one is a value chain transformation for oil and gas. This is a Latin American oil and gas NOC, National Oil Company. So the challenge was that the company couldn't reliably trace the ownership of the crude from the source, from the wellhead, to the refinery. Okay? They don't do the marketing and pay the people that owns the oil. And they the production planning and scheduling were behind closing the book. They were closing the book every 30 days. Industry closes the book every day on balancing production planning, production scheduling. So if you look at what we use in this case, in this client, the software, we look at Invensys, we look at Meridian, we look at Honeywell. And Honeywell, we look at Honeywell for several items, for alarm management, for operation management, and some of the software needs to be aligned. And as far as technology, again, there is a theme here going on with technology. There's big data, there's blockchain, there is social, there is mobile, cloud, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, you're going to see it on and on. Augmented and virtual reality, remote access automation, that mainly for control, for blending, for tanks, for operation, and IoT. So this one is different than the prior one. It has sensors, IoT into the equation. So the setting for this one, it started from the, like I mentioned earlier, the well gate and the stop at the refinery fence. We started with creating a governance model. So it wasn't a very well established ownership. We had an integrated tool for how to couple supply chain. I mentioned earlier that they all need to talk to each other. So it is important that it's integration. So that actually helped to close the book transparently daily. It became an end-to-end transformation. So we looked at, like I mentioned, all the processes from the wellhead to the refinery gate, but not only looking at production planning and schedule, we're looking at the lab, looking at operation, we're looking at manufacturing, so looking at everything, because everything is connected. So the approach that we took with this client, everybody was involved on this one. So business, IT, headquarters, and the prior one, headquarters was not directly involved at the beginning. So headquarters was involved on this one. And same as the prior one, it started with the people and the process. And technology was implemented 6 months after the people and technology, people and process was aligned. In this case, we had a strong change management support to manage all the stakeholders from the development part. So early implementation all the way to going live. We had change management. We decided to implement it all out, so it was implemented throughout all the site. And the benefits on this case were realized fairly quickly. And the main reason was, full organizational employment and change management support. That's key for the implementation. So full engagement organization is key in order to deliver on the digital transformation. The next one is an end-to-end transformation for upstream and downstream. This is a bit of a challenge and learning, but it recovered at the end. You see a little bit of red there. This is a Canadian integrated oil company. The company acquired another company about the same size as the company. So all the processes and technology were disconnected, causing major business impact. They couldn't pay the vendors. They couldn't do the work in the field. People show up and the parts were not there. It is a huge impact to the business. It included SAP, complete SAP implementation, and included Meridian. Technology, we look at very heavily at big data analytics. On this one, we had to do a major cleaning of the data. The data was contaminated and put a lot of governance into the data. Look at blockchain, how to pay the clients using blockchain, how to manage the business. Social, how to connect with the people in the field. Mobile as well. Cloud, cybersecurity, augmented reality. We did remote process automation, IoT. So the setting for this one, it started as an asset management request. So the CEO thought that reality, the problem for this was an asset management. So asked to do an assessment of the asset management. And it really turned out to everything was disconnected in the business. So it needed what we call an end-to-end transformation. And we did to deliver the value. I started with the operating model redesign. I think more than redesign on this one was a realign. So align the new business, which was about same size as the old business. Did a process alignment. And the process will look at all functions and then integrated the functions. So first of all, develop all the processes across the function. Then we went back and look at the integration point for all the processes. And the same thing for technology. Do the integration of the different technology and decide what to keep and what not to keep. In this case, the approach that the client took or suggested to take, it was mainly driven by this, I mentioned earlier, the CEO and the headquarters. So headquarters drove the development and support the implementation. Business in the field were not involved. IT, just headquarters IT was involved. So it was a bit of an effort to try to build the whole thing, understanding what the business needs, because at the end of the day, the business is going to use this. Also, it started with technology. So technology was at the forefront of the implementation of this one, and that was a request. And it was actually put on hold after the discussion with the CEO. Technology, starting with technology, is not necessarily good. It created a bit more confusion. Without proper process alignment, it was a bit of confusion. They already had enough technology and enough confusion as it was without, by adding additional technology, created more confusion. So we put that on hold and address the people and the process were completed and then back to technology. We had to perform people and process transformation ahead, so like I mentioned, put on hold, and then we actually revisited some of the technology to make sure that met the requirements that the business need. And the implementation was across all sides after that. As sort of results, given all the churn that I just talked about, benefits were realized 2 years and took additional 2.5 years to realize the full benefits. So the business case for this client was $1.2 to $1.4 billion. So business and site IT were not invited at the beginning. So I mentioned that earlier on. It was mainly headquarters, and it took a long time to realize the saving due to the starting with headquarters with technology. So the takeaway, this proves the case that people process are the first component to tackle in the digital transformation, and that all organizations need to be involved to make transformation deliver quick results. So at the end of the day, it is a business case. This is what we call a typical value realization timing for a digital transformation. This is actually a case as well, that chart there on the right. It is a smart manufacturing predictive analytic for all critical equipment implementing a global IOC. So if you look at the chart, the people and process changes took about 6 months, and the client realized about 25% of the savings for the business case. Then created the variables tables and implemented variable tables, which is variable tables are all the operating envelope for the different equipment, the bands where the equipment need to operate. And implemented without a lot of technology. It took about 6 months and realized about, I would say 50 to 60% of the value of the client. And then the actual technology was, throughout this whole cycle, was in development, but it was implemented a year after, and the full value was realized, achieved after 3 years. It included implementation of Meridian, Bentley Nevada, among the softwares. It had also big analytics, social, mobile, cloud, cybersecurity, augmented and virtual reality. So looking at digital implementation, this cycle is a bit long, and that was 3 years ago. So the cycle implementation is getting shorter than what it used to be. And that mainly has to do with the urgency of the business. And so for some businesses, it's key to stay in business, to do the digital implementation and doing it right. Another one is the front line needs communication. So we're losing, the industry is losing a lot of the expertise at the front line. And they have to somehow compensate for the expertise using technology, social, mobile, to communicate with the expert at remote location, to solve the issues of the business, especially globalized business. There is also new generation of craft engineer that are inclined to use more technology and more familiar with technology. So they need the tools to actually operate. They feel they need the tools. And there is a new way of working to drive digital. So there is short experience. They're trying to, a lot of the clients are trying and implementing technology to shorten the learning cycle. The operations are a bit more complex than what they used to be. There is a lot of automation in the field. Driving technology, because technology actually become part of the process, not for a lot of the client. So looking at the main takeaways, one, looking at the success factor, it is 60% effort and cost to actually do a proper change management for a client. It is a lot of effort to do that and to do it well. You have to start with the people, and start with the business culture, start with the processes. So that's what the main effort is. Number two, and I mentioned earlier, have a clear business case. And a business case that is fully bought in by the organization, and track the post-monitor and communicate the business case throughout the entire transformation cycle. It is important. Don't cost short into having that business case person monitoring if it's still valid, the value case, what's the cost throughout the whole cycle. And the organization with the business case also, whoever is managing or whoever is sponsoring the project has to be flexible to make quick adjustments. And I mentioned earlier, either slow down, move, or abandon a project. So flexibility, it is key for transformation. And you have to be willing, the clients have to be willing to do that. And last one is data security is key for the health of the business. So if we look at the data security layer, a lot of what we call a level 1, which is at the equipment level, or level 2, which is at the plant level, are moving to the platform, which is at the level 3, at the operational level. So getting closer to the web, to the open access. So cybersecurity is key to the plant operation for refining for any asset company. And with that, I jump to questions and answers. Jeremy.
Thank you, Walter. Look, you went through an incredible amount of information. Congratulations. You did it in very few slides. I applaud you for the amount of information. So here's something as you were talking that has struck me, and I apologize if this is starting with a very obvious question. But let me also remind everyone to use the chat function to submit your questions. I will kick off with a couple things that came to mind as I listened to Walter's presentation. So like I said, hopefully this isn't too much of an obvious thing that maybe I'm just a little bit slow on, but you talked at some point, and I think part of this entire presentation has something to do with what we hear a lot about, the IoT, or I guess the Internet of Things, which is a key piece of this whole digital topic. So here's my question. What exactly is that? I mean, in a fairly concise definition, but more importantly, why is that so important? I know that was the thrust of your presentation, but why is it so important to, that we begin to, and you say companies embrace it, that we begin to really understand it? So two parts. One, help me really understand what IoT means and why, in a sentence or two, it's so key to embrace and utilize.
Yeah, it's nothing new in reality. I mean, there is a lot of discussion on IoT nowadays, and they embrace, all of us are embracing more and more. What that is putting sensors and the equipment, sending the data to a database or a center that can use that data to make decision, to monitor the equipment, to make decision on the equipment. If you look at the oil industry, we have more and more data for vibrational critical equipment. Example, that's one example. It goes either to the board or goes to the computer that would sense if the equipment gets into trouble for vibration, something is failing, or there is an operational issue for the equipment. It has cavitating. So they can make quick adjustment. There is analytic that will help the clients make quick decision what to do to actually save that equipment, to do some predictive analytics way ahead before the failure. There is IoT, one example that I'm gonna use. It's great to represent this with example. I had a cooling tower that was creating fouling in the exchanger at the crew unit. The root cause was that the water for the cooling tower wasn't treated properly, so the operator had to go and treat the water every so many hours, but it couldn't do that. So we put actually sensors, and we put a system in place. So what the water quality changes, something will trigger the operator, or actually a pump will start and treat the water. So we cause the problem with the fouling of the exchanger. So it's using the technology with the sensors and the data in order to make decisions to drive the business. And there is more and more of that. Now, that creates a lot more data. That creates a lot of more information. And the business has to analyze what to do with all that data and information in order to make decisions. It is what we call it the big data. Too much data, so in many cases. Did that answer your question?
And no, absolutely. In fact, you set up something else that I was thinking about. But let me ask before I continue to abuse my moderator privilege, Ricardo, a first question. Walter, in your experience, what is the most difficult challenge to overcome when implementing an IoT digital system inside an organization? So this is your management consulting opportunity to tell us what the challenges are and how to overcome them.
The challenge, and I did, in the last case that presented for the smart manufacturing, the challenge is to build the business case, a sound business case, because at the end of the day, you have to sell it. And you're selling something that, in reality, it prevents the business for failures. It prevents the business for opportunity. So in this case, in the last case I talked about smart manufacturing, I asked the big integrated oil company to get data for the past 3 years for all the failures they had. So I analyzed the data, what of that data could be prevented using IoT or smart manufacturing. Then I validated that with the client, and I sold it. I actually went to the investment committee to get it and monitor. So the first challenge is building that strong business case that have full buy-in for the organization. The second challenge is get the alignment to do the implementation. You have to align with the business. You have to align with IT. You have to align with the headquarters. So that's the second challenge. And the third challenge is, I think it's important, is finding the right opportunity to connect all these IoT. Because in many cases it would require a shutdown, a turnaround to put a sensor or something in the field. So finding and scheduling the right opportunity that you have in order to put those devices out on the field once you have the whole business case. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, let's see if Ricardo has any follow-up. So here's a and I think what you just again addressed is sort of the business case. Well, why? Because of the efficiency and cost savings. And so what I, without putting words in your mouth, what I think you're saying is using data and data analytics, you can see that if you know a certain process or a certain piece of equipment has had repetitive failure on a certain part or a certain area of the process, you can begin to troubleshoot that and not have it go offline, and therefore you can avoid outages and therefore the efficiencies and cost gains.
Yeah.
Let me oh, Ricardo said that was perfect. So let me go back to something I wanted to go to pivot to when you mentioned about big data and analytics. And there was something whenever we talk about these themes, I've been struck for a couple of years. A couple of years ago, a CEO of a national oil company in Latin America talked about how they were, absolutely 100% in favor and looking forward to embracing everything you talked about, Walter. However, they're extremely budget constrained, a very limited resources financially. But the interesting point that this national oil company from Latin America executive talked about was he wasn't just worried about the expenditures on the financial side, but worrying about if you make those huge investments with the goal of the efficiencies and cost savings, do you have the human capital? And I think that's what you mentioned that talked about people and business culture. And so here's the question. How can a national oil company in Latin America that has, huge financial and human capital constraints do everything that you talked about in your slides? So that's an easy question right there for you.
Yeah, believe it or not, the human part, it is important to drive this. And the financial constraint, in many cases, when you look for the digital implementation, and actually that is a continuation of the prior discussion, it is once you have the business case, what best-in-class clients do is track misses. When I say a miss is, I found an equipment, it is a missed opportunity, I saved that equipment by using the IoT. So that turns into, they track that for a period anywhere from 1 to 5 years. That builds a business case. So that actually it becomes a funding from the next wave, because you're not going to do in many cases, you're not going to do a full implementation. You actually look at criticality. What is critical to first do the implementation? Because you have limited resources. Out of those critical equipment, you track the misses that you save by having the system. And that becomes money in the bank, I call it, to actually fund the next wave on implementation. And that's what we do with a lot of clients, even the big clients, the big IOC companies across the world. The big clients look for the funding requirement. So it doesn't become an expense, it becomes an investment to do that. Now, in the human capital, you look at it two ways. Is the human capital needs to be in tune with the digital technology. So there is a lot of stakeholder management that needs to happen at the beginning. Either throughout the organization, or somebody will come from the outside to help them. And in many cases, organization, NOCs, even IOCs bring people like myself or in the industry to helping at the beginning to accelerate the curve and to accelerate the implementation. And most important, to avoid making costly mistake, because it can be very costly when you do a big transformation. So, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. So the point is, with a national oil company, I think it's a bit of a different, when you talked about best in class, and not that national oil company can't be best in class, but you have a very different, I would guess, calculation or calculus. But look, I want to get to Pauline's question here, and then we'll wrap up. GIS, geospatial intelligence, Earth observation companies are working on using their imaging services to help mining companies find areas to explore. The question is, how can this be used and applied in the oil and gas sector? So as part of sort of the digital and data toolkit, if you will.
Yeah, they are using GIS and somewhat and very sophisticated for exploration and production and the oil. can that what they have in the mining be used in the oil? Of course, they can be used. I mean, we there is so much out there right now, and not only the oil industry. In reality, is looking outside the oil industry to bring technology into the oil industry. Example. I looked when I work at Shell. I look at Pratt Whitney, an aircraft engine, how they do their business, how they do their technology. I look at nuclear plants, how they manage their business. And brought that into the industry, into Shell. So yes, do we need to look at other industry to bring into the oil company? Yes. Are we using it? Yes. And we're using a lot of the things, but there is a lot more to learn from other industry like mining. Did that answer?
Walter, let's okay. Pauline had a question about automation, so if you want to jump in really quickly on automation, and then I want to wrap up with what you can talk about on blockchain and cybersecurity, because you mentioned that a lot during the course of the presentation, but I want to come back and really see some final thoughts on those. But first, any thoughts on automation?
Well, for the oil and gas industry, they're trying to automation is key. I mean, right now they're automating a lot of the process, taking what we call the people out of the equation. I mean, if you look at centralized control rooms for fields for different wells, or centralized control room for operation for the plant, there is a lot of automation going for blending, for tank farm, for all the plant operation. In the past, they used to have a typical unit, used to have 4 or 5 operators monitor all the different gauges. Right now, because of the automation of the process, there is only 2, 3, or maybe people in the field, but the key person is actually the person that sits in the board. He has control of all the instrumentation, all the controls from the board. So automation is key nowadays, and for several reasons: to optimize the process, to look after the quality of the product, and also the last one is it is important. I mean, is taking the human factor when it's possible out of the equation to avoid issues.
So yes, Pauline and everyone else, we will download Walter's slides. We will also download the recording. We'll share that with everyone. We'll put that online hopefully later today and get that out to everyone. So absolutely, the slide deck as well as the recording of the webinar will be available to everyone going forward to download. So okay, the human resource management is a mystery for the industry, David Eddick says. So I guess, Walter, maybe that was what you were trying to say. Let's leave the human capital question, because I really did want to wrap up with your thoughts on 2 things that I think are increasingly important. I mean, we can't go a day without a headline about cybersecurity. Let's wrap up first, though, with blockchain. Sort of my same question on IoT. You know, we hear so much about blockchain, but give us a 1-minute answer on what it is and why it's important to understand.
The blockchain is still a myth, right? Because I mean, in reality, the oil industry is a bit scared about blockchain. The blockchain pretty much come out of the whole Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. They're using it. They started to use it more and more to do transaction, to pay vendors, to do transaction for oil and gas supply. So it is important. It creates transparency. It takes the people out of the equation, and it creates an open environment. But there is again, going back to the people part, it's still the mentality that needs to change. The blockchain is safe. Don't believe all. They actually caught up in the cryptocurrency issues, which are not issues right now. So, but more and more clients are coming on board, especially the mature organization with digital. Are you there?
Sorry, I had problems with my microphone. So okay, no, that's fine. I mean, again, that topic is something we could spend a lot more time on.
Yeah.
So let's go to then, cybersecurity, because again, as you move into more and more of a digital platform, and as you utilize more and more of data, and data is flying around in cyberspace, as it were, you have this question of cybersecurity. I mean, we just hear the news this morning of again some Russians getting indicted for cyber attacks, and I know, for example, the California Independent System Operator, they literally spend every day repelling cyber attacks. So cybersecurity, help us understand that, and we'll wrap up with that point, Walter. And thanks.
No problem. Cybersecurity, there is a myth that, cybersecurity, a lot of people think, buy a bots and put a firewall, that solve my issue. In reality, it's not. Cybersecurity, just like the digital implementation, had a lot to do with people. Anybody, an example, somebody can come in with a computer stick and go inside your firewall, and that's it, connect to the system. It has to do a lot with the discipline, with the people. First of all, having a good governance, and yeah, you can have the system that can protect the cyber. I mean, I believe there is some people here and the call that have cyber experience, but I mean, there is I call it the black bots that will protect the organization from cyber attack. But it has to start with people. It has to start with governance. Otherwise, the black bots will not work. And yes, we're still going to see more of that. And organizations are worried because, like I mentioned earlier, they're opening up the plant, the equipment, the plant to actually the operational level, which is open to the internet. And guess what? That requires a high level of security. In the case I was mentioning earlier around manufacturing the plant that we built in the pilot that we did in Japan and Singapore for $7 billion. We actually, the company, before we actually launched, we were going to launch it into a public cloud. They wanted to have the architects look at their cyber and see if they can break into the cyber even before we implement it. And guess what? They were able to penetrate the cloud, and we forgot about going into the public cloud at that point. The company is very, very private. So we went into inside the firewall cloud and create a system. So even the public cloud that seemed to be safe, it wasn't safe.
Well, I don't know if that's where I want to end.
It
seemed to be safe, but it wasn't safe. Walter, come on.
Well, the public cloud. What I'm saying, the public wasn't safe. Move to inside the firewall. So we learned from that, and we actually before we deploy.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, I just thought it was, after everything you said, we thought we were safe. No, look, this is the cyber. I mean, as you've outlined, again, there's a lot of the human element, and so unfortunately, as long as these strategic assets, have strategic value, and especially when it comes to infrastructure and in terms of cyber attacks, I know that's with a lot of energy infrastructure. There's a big concern because they will always be sought out to for cyber attacks. So this is going to be something for sure. I didn't mean to make the discussion all about that. The presentation was much grander in scope, but thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Walter Pesenti from Nathan Associates, thank you for your participation and your insights. Always a pleasure to hear what you have to say, and congratulations on a great presentation. And if you don't mind, I will again talk about the things we've got in person coming up October 9th next week in Mexico City. We'll talk about the social license operates from a standpoint of digital and data, as well as what our roundtable is October 23rd and 24th. So hope to see you all in person. Stay tuned for announcements on our future energy webinar series installments that will be coming up shortly. And I'd like to end by saying, please check out www.iamericas.org. Yesterday, we launched a new website. So speaking of digital transformation, Walter, the Institute of the Americas underwent a fairly minor but complicated digital transformation vis-a-vis our website yesterday. We launched a whole new site, and we're pretty proud of it, and hope you'll check it out. So thank you all very much. Appreciate having you with us. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.